Okay. So do I have an internet connection? Go live. It says I'm live. I can see myself. I can hear myself. That's great. All right. That's good. I'll get Simon on. Go to the mail app. Where's the mail? Hey, everybody. In lockdown. Here in New Zealand, we call it lockdown. I think some of the other parts of the world, they're calling it what are they calling it? Oh, shit. Confinement? Hold on. Simon. Where's Simon? There he is. Okay. Attach the link. Paste. Send. Job done. That job is done. Go back to StreamYards. All right. Phone. Doesn't recognize me with my headphones on. Isn't that great? It doesn't recognize me with my headphones on. 1, 2. What's going on here? Nothing seems to be working. Nothing seems to be working in New Zealand. Nothing seems to be working.
Except we're live. Good morning.
Message if you get this Facebook Messenger message from me. I've been trying to send it for about 5 minutes.
The last one I had was it said you were ready in 10 minutes.
So have you got a message?
Yeah, it says sent.
Okay, so that's working now.
Yeah. Well, I got the link.
That's interesting. Okay, so the email worked, so that's good.
Yeah. all the important bits worked.
Yeah, I've had seems to be the usual story. Some interesting connection issues.
It's just sheer weight of traffic, isn't it?
Oh,
just everybody's doing it.
Can you hear that? Is that coming across all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got no one in the chat. Hey, Simon's in the chat. Hey, Simon. Hey, Andrew. Andrew and Simon are here. I forget what day this is. Is it Saturday or Sunday or Monday or Tuesday? God knows.
It's God Day, yes. Yeah. It's well, in my world, it's Sunday morning.
Sunday evening here.
Sunday evening here. Yep. How's your day?
Just another day.
Just another day in lockup.
Trying to remain what's the word?
John
optimistic.
Good morning, John. How you doing?
Trying to remain optimistic, upbeat, upfront, and all that. Our government's sending out smoke signals and following the UN global agenda following the UN global agenda very well by saying that we should be in lockdown for another 3 weeks on top of the 4 that they originally.
Yeah.
I've got a friend in Australia who sent me a message saying that they could be down for lockdown till October.
Blimey.
Hey, John.
Good morning, John.
Yeah.
Hey,
John, can you hear that? How does that sound? That's my Stevie Ray Vaughan tone. Well, a version of it.
I like this is my version of it, John. It's Stevie Ray Vaughan tone. Then just making it your own.
Who's John Harden?
I don't know.
John's been in the chat a couple of for a couple of weeks. Where are you from,
Harding.
John? Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about you. I think you're friends with the great Vanzini because he seemed to have. I remember he recognised your name when he was on last time. Are you an American? Tell us what's going on in America. From Tennessee. Awesome.
Memphis, Tennessee.
Fantastic.
The deep south.
Awesome.
So, yeah. What's it like in Tennessee, John?
Yeah. Are you in lockdown? Are you guys in quarantine? Are you? Is it voluntary or forced?
Is Tennessee one of the lockdown states, or is it one of the few that isn't? I can't remember.
Oh, mate,
so when they're grilling you, John, and you have to type like mad.
or if you're really, really techie, you've got your microphone and it's on dictation, and you just press the microphone.
And talk.
And then talk.
120 miles north of Memphis, locked in.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's a good place to be. Yeah.
I think it's gonna get quite strange, isn't it? You know, you get the first couple of weeks is kind of like tootle. You know, you're just getting used to it. You're just kind of getting it organised. But I think after a couple of months, it's going to be a bit more difficult myself.
So can you see my lockdown beard?
I can see a lockdown beard. Well, I design a stubble, as I like to call it.
Well, unfortunately, as I've gotten older, it's gotten greyer. And in the olden days, if I had a beard for over a week, it would be jet black, man, and you'd be going, "Holy cow! Holy smokes! Holy!" Now because it's grey, it's very hard for you guys to see. And you know, I do close-ups.
Well, I'm the same. I'm the same. You know, I see grey. Just pleased to still have some on top. But, you know, hasn't all disappeared.
So I'm doing a lockdown
John,
beard.
Bad luck, mate. John Harding says with his health, if he gets it, he's a goner. Well.
Okay, well, stay safe. Obviously, you have respiratory issues.
Respiratory, yeah. Well, it's interesting. In my village where I live in a village of about, I don't know, 2,500, 3,000 people.
Yeah.
I know 2 people who've got it.
Oh, wow.
There are a couple, some people I know. They've got it. They've been isolating for the last 10 days or so. And they've had a test as well.
Oh, that's sad.
So they will know. Well, they're all right. They're better. You know, they're like a lot of people. It's, you know, quite nasty, but it's not completely horrendous. They didn't. And there's Kubrick Lover. Morning, Kubrick Lover. How you doing? Hope you're good.
Hey, Kubrick. No, we're just shooting the wind, Kubrick.
And Dave as well.
Nothing much has been said. Other than if you can notice my lockdown beard.
The lockdown beard.
Oh, I've got something else locked down to show you guys too.
Oh, good. All right. Lockdown show and tell.
So these are lockdown vans. Okay, because we can't go anywhere, so you've got to have a pair of new Vans to wear inside.
To wear inside.
Yeah. Don't wear your slippers. Don't wear your flip-flops. Don't wear socks.
Just wear.
Get some shoes, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I have kind of, shoes. I have these like leather slippers with kind of proper soles and stuff that I
Yeah.
can guy because I spend half like going in and out of, outside and in. So yeah, I have sort of shoes like that. I mean, proper sort of like yeah. John Harden says he used to wear those until he grew up. Andrew's still attempting it. Frankly, not without. He's got a C- in growing up. Must try harder.
I got them because they're slip-ons and they were cheap on special in the special bin.
Well, well, 20 Australia did a special bin because
normally $100, and I got them for $39.95, which is not bad.
Well, you see, we're all destined for the bargain bin, aren't we? It's only a matter of time.
Have you been watching any good channels over the last couple of days? Are there any YouTube shows that has sparked your interest?
Well, I mean, aside from the normal, I mean, I watched Nez Says, which I thought was really good. I really enjoyed that. Johnny Bean, so I watched quite a bit. He's been doing his vlog every day in April, except the first 2 days. Why not? Arvin, how you doing?
Hey, Arvin.
Good to see you. Hope you're well.
Can you guys hear my guitar? Is it coming okay through the internet?
Through the internet. That's it. I'll tell you what I was watching last night in between having a family. We had a family, video conference. Not too grand a word. My brother, my mum.
I'm glad you said it was video conference because I was going to ring Boris and knock you if you had a clandestine family gathering.
I got to show you something funny when we're doing it though, because we're using a thing called House Party. I don't know if you've come across it.
No, but I used to go to a few in the 1990s.
Yeah, well, I tell you what. Now look at this. This is the app, right?
Hey, Vanzini, hold on, Vanzini. We got to present Simon. He's going to show us something. Hopefully, it's not X-rated. It looks X-rated.
No, it is X-rated. Yes, it is quite X-rated. Look. You see the top one? I don't know. Come on, focus, you slimy
focus.
It says. Can you see? It says House Party.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the app. Okay. Now the one underneath. Can you see what that says?
No. What does it say?
Sex games for couples. you press the wrong bloody app. You get something you didn't bargain for at all.
You're in trouble.
Well, most of the time, yeah. That was really funny. I had to take a photograph. I thought, bloody hell, it's like easy now. It's a big step from having a little sort of 4-way gathering with your family and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's quite it's quite funny that. But one of the things I did listen to today, I'm sure I've gassed on about this up here before. I don't know, John. I didn't look. It just came up like that, and I thought that's funny. I'm going to take a photograph of that. So I did. But I was listening to a little podcast by sort of vlog really by two British music journalists, Mark Allen and David Hepworth. They used to present the old grey whistle test.
Oh yeah.
What that is after Bob Harris. They presented it, so they're really good. One of the things they
a lot of the shows, old shows of was on YouTube, Simon.
Yeah,
a lot of them.
Yeah, so hopefully they'll be on there. So
awesome. So when were they hosting it, in the 80s or 70s? These guys.
After Bob Harris, so that must be the late 70s, early 80s, I would guess.
Okay, awesome, good, a good time.
A good time, yeah. But they're old mates, and they run all manner of. I don't know if you've come across Mojo magazine from the UK.
Yeah.
Well, they started that.
I've got a couple of issues here somewhere.
They used to run a sort of much more pop magazine called Smash Hits.
Yeah,
and at which one of the people who used to work there was Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys.
Yep, know the name.
That's right. Back in the mid-70s, Kubrick lover. That was Bob Harris era. That was I think it was the publicised the Earl's Court gigs that I'm sure you know I went to. Did I mention I went to see Led Zeppelin at Earl's Court in 1975? Yes. Did I mention tickets were only £2.50? Am I becoming a bore? But so one of the things they were talking about last night that applies to us. Andrew, what are you doing? Is there rodents down there or something?
No, I'm looking for something. I'm listening. I can hear you. I've got a pile of mojos here somewhere. Okay, buried.
The thing I was at... yes, I did, didn't I? Yes. The thing they were talking about the Beano album. John Mayall's Blues Breakers. But what I was interesting, they were saying, and I hadn't sort of, we hadn't picked it. That's it. Now, what does it? No, but hold on, Andrew, hold it up, because it's really good. Now, what does it say? It says Blues Breakers with John Mayall with Eric Clapton.
Eric Clapton, yes.
Now, when was the first time you saw an album that said with a particular musician, with a particular person?
Now, I'm just going to. I just want to just inject some. Have you and I spoken about this a year ago, or
no?
Or two?
I don't think we've ever pointed out that the cover. Obviously, we talked about the cover and him reading the Beano, which is why I called it Beano album. But the interesting bit is Blues Breakers, John Mayall's Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton. Like, can you think of another group like where the guitar player, and this is the cult of guitar player, is kind of featured on the cover? It doesn't say with Eric Clapton, John McVie. No. It just says with Eric Clapton. Now, Eric Clapton, obviously we've been in the Yardbirds before that. But, that he must have been something of a cult figure even from the Yardbirds. But don't you think it's interesting? That's kind of the beginning of Clapton is God, kind of Clapton is and guitar hero. Because you're featuring it. You're saying, with this guitar player on the front. And I was just thinking, well, any other? Can you think of any other bands where they did that? I mean, they didn't put Led Zeppelin featuring Jimmy Page, did they?
No,
the Yardbirds. Did they do the Yardbirds featuring Jeff Beck? Did they do it?
No. But I'm just trying to remember through my foggy mind. I think I had a conversation. I thought it was either with you or with Carl. And now Carl told me, I'm remembering now, that he watched the John Mayall documentary.
Yeah.
And recently, and it had been about 18 months since I'd seen that documentary. And Carl mentioned that he thought that was due to the fact that John Mayall was very clever, understood that Eric Clapton had a following from the Yardbirds.
From the Yardbirds, yeah.
And locked into the fact that he was going to sell more records by putting Eric Clapton on the center stage with them. Now, is that a smart thing to do from a band leader's perspective? You bet.
No, completely. You bet it is. Yeah. And that kind of backs up my point, doesn't it? That for the first time, John Mayall, clever bloke, in many ways a clever bloke,
Yeah.
And one of those ways is that I can't think of an earlier time when that is the beginning of the age of the guitar hero, where the guitar hero was the person, and because as I say, I can't think of another album from that age where they put featuring so and so. It's like as the guitar player, even if they just joined.
So let me ask you guys questions then that I can't honestly think of the answer, which I think is related to answering your question, Simon. So maybe the guys in the chat, Van Zeni, might know too. We know when that album came out. It came out midway through 1996, July 1996.
66.
66. Sorry.
96. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Sorry.
30
I'm
years.
thinking of ways.
Yeah. No, go on.
In 66. When did Jimi Hendrix get to London?
Oh, not till 67.
Okay,
Hendrix's.
so he would have been listening to that album, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, in America. Did he listen to the album, or was it Cream when he first heard of Eric Clapton, or the Yardbirds? When did he hear of Clapton?
I lied about that. He arrived on September the 23rd, 1966. He arrived in the UK.
He would have heard that album in the UK.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, because of course the person who would have played it to him was Chas Chandler.
Okay.
Wouldn't they? So Chas Chandler would have played it to him.
Big time, because it wasn't like, I think it was Simon again. I can't remember. It was in the top 20 anyway. It was in the top 20, top 10. It wasn't like a big hit, but it was, it was a major drop, wasn't it?
I think that it's, and probably it's one of those albums that may not have sold 1 million copies to start with, but everybody who bought it became a musician. Yeah. Started playing a guitar, was a band. It's a bit like the Velvet Underground thing, isn't it? The first Velvet Underground album only sold 1,000 copies, but every one of those 1,000 people went on to form a band, kind of thing. So hugely influential. I think that let's just see if we can find out where it. Album. Oh yeah, John Mayall's Blues Breakers. That it. Let's see. It reached number 6 in the UK charts.
Okay, so
but
it
wasn't certified gold until 1998. So it didn't sell more than 100,000 copies until 1998.
Okay. So the Rolling Stones were listening to that album. Jimi Hendrix was listening to that album. The Beatles were listening to that album.
Yeah, completely. Everyone's listening to that album. And to go alongside it,
wow.
When they went on, Clapton, the other thing that he did in the, by one of the Blues Breakers is go and say to Jim Marshall, I want you to make me a 50-watt combo amp that will fit in my car. That's the other bit. And with a Les Paul. So basically, he then goes on tour around the country, and all those people go and see him, like Kossoff and, all these other, blues guitar players. And what he does is he sells, everywhere he goes, people go, look at that kit, and they go off and buy a Les Paul and a Marshall. So it becomes the sound of British blues, and that's the other thing that's down to him as well. So his influence in in not only as a guitar player, that album and the kit, that he was using to do it.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt you here. So I've just made a connection. So it's not just the bloody album. It's not the bloody album by itself. It was the fact that he had the album and he was able to go out and play that album, that tone, that sound that people were hearing live in a club for the first time, that inspired a generation of guitar players to say, this guy is sounding like the record for a change.
Yeah, because remember, when he recorded that album, what did he do?
Yeah.
He said to the engineer, put the microphone where the audience would be. So then you get a much truer version of the sound and the tone on the record than you probably did before, when you just set up to record and you put it in. So what you kind of see is that that album promotes a sound, it promotes gear, it promotes a way of getting that sound. It also promotes the the start, I'd say, the cult of the guitar player, the star guitar player. The drummer's not up there featuring. It's Eric Clapton.
Well, the reason why it's going to
Amazing.
inspire guitar players is because, again, I'm going to go back to the point that I've just discovered in my mind, having a conversation with you, is that the guys for the first time were listening to a record and then watching a guy play and sound like the record, or vice versa. Guys were watching Clapton, went and bought that record, dropped it, and said, "Simon, far out! He sounds just like he did at the Workman's Club last week, and we're half past Simon."
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of in that period where people are trying to record themselves more the way they sounded live. Getting that kind of bigger tone and things like that. So it's what's John Hardy saying? He's saying he played in country bands through the 70s and 80s. Not many rock bands around, but really, I suppose, Tennessee is it's country territory, isn't it, John? Missed out on a lot of rock music. You were playing out with John. What do you play? Are you a guitar player? Like the rest of us. Yeah, long cool. The Hollies, long cool woman in a black dress. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I haven't thought of it like that, Simon. But I think what we're seeing now is a reciprocity process with that album, and the linkages between that album, the band, the gigs, the portability, like you've just said, of an amp.
Yeah.
You were getting a crunchy amp. You weren't getting that clean, jangly stuff that a lot of guys were playing. Guys were listening to an overdriven guitar for the first time and going,
Yeah. And there can't have been many overdriven guitars before that.
No.
A bit, I think Link Ray, possibly, Rumble, possibly that kind of the odd bit here and there. The Kinks, Dave Davis slashing his speaker cab with the razor blade.
Well, the Rolling Stones didn't get any crunch until they went and recorded number 2, 5x4 or whatever, and that was in America until they didn't get any crunch until they were in America playing Fenders.
Well, I presume the Keith Richards had the fuzz pedal. That's probably. But
yeah, but that was
maybe
65.
fuzz is different too.
So that was again still after that out. That was
When Satisfaction 66.
65. Oh, okay. No. Yeah, 65. 65, Simon. Okay, but that's a pedal. That's a pedal as opposed to an amp.
Yeah. And it's not. It's a specific thing, isn't it? It's
yeah.
So you on a slightly.
I haven't.
So you kind of So I kind of think that that in a sense, although it's staring us in the face, there's more going on than we've sort of than we've talked about. And as you just said, it's a coming together of that whole thing of it's the first time I can think of, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's some other things, but hi Sonia, how you doing?
Hi Sonia.
That where he's the first sort of guitar hero like that. Because can you think of anybody before him who really,
No.
I can't, because if you go back, you go to the Beatles and beat groups and stuff, they were like tight 3-minute pop song beat groups, weren't they? So there wasn't. I admire George Harrison immensely, but he wasn't like Mr. Flash guitar player, was he? Not not like that.
He was a Beatle. He wasn't a guitar hero, Simon. Yeah, he was in a band. He was a Beatle. He was John and the Beatles. He wasn't. Yeah.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't going to say the Beatles featuring George Harrison on the front, Was it ever?
Well, the Rolling Stones weren't like that either. They had Brian Jones and Keith Richards, and neither of them were isolated as a guitar god.
No, they weren't, were they? Didn't really. No, they were. It's all part of an integral sound, isn't it? A band sound.
Wasn't until Mick Taylor came into the band that they had a guitar god, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and of course Mick Taylor followed Eric Clapton, didn't he, in the Blues Breakers? So, in a sense, John Mayall is the man who kind of instigated it. What we're saying is he kind of, and I'm sure, as you've just said, consciously instigated it. So saying, I've got a bloke who plays, flash guitar from the Yardbirds. I can make something off the back of this, as you would. I want to sell some albums. Let's be honest. It's some of it's about.
Can I just interrupt you, Simon? So he wasn't interested in his own ego, his own image. It was it was a business venture. That I'm going to say inspired him to share the spotlight with Eric Clapton. That's a great thing.
And interestingly,
that's not narcissistic, is it?
No, it isn't narcissistic. No, that's not self-regarding. That's
entrepreneurial.
And also him saying to all those guys, Peter Green, Eric Clapton, Mick Taylor, pass through my doors and then off you go. When they got an offer from, when Eric got an offer from, to do Cream, he didn't go. He didn't. You don't hear. I've never heard John Mayall getting huffy about the fact he went off to, form Cream. I've never heard John Mayall get Quentin James. How you doing? It's Quentin James.
Hey Quentin, thanks for popping in. How you doing? Say good day. Yeah. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you, Quentin. Cool. You're hilarious. You are. You are a bright ray on social media.
Crazy stuff. Love it. Quentin, I was thinking of you the other night. We had steak the other night, and my youngest daughter wanted to put ketchup on it. My wife was berating her for this. I thought of you immediately, which is cool. But it's interesting, isn't it? That lack of ego meant that he obviously, and I'm sure he realised that Clapton wasn't going to stick around for 10 years in the Blues Breakers. He'd be going off to do something else. Mick Taylor went off to do something else. Peter Green went off to do something else. And he just, his job was to find the next one, wasn't it? Yeah. See, steak lovers and yes, your influence is everywhere, Quentin. Hilarious.
This guy must sit down and plan his social media
blitz
jaunts for a week, or it's either that or it just comes to him in these creative processes, Simon.
The way he gets all the other YouTubers to shout him out and do stuff. It's just good, great fun. It's good fun. But so there you are. That really interested me. And Satisfaction was 65, June 65. But don't you think that as I say that it kind of, they were talking about it, and it struck me. You think, wait a minute. There's something else going on here besides, or something more going on. Whether it's the zeitgeist or whether it's luck or judgment or whatever. But
I think you've given us something to think about, ponder, and maybe come back on future shows and just make some more linkages and connections, because it's just proof, Simon, that an album that's 54 years old, 53 years old, you're finding different things to talk about and put it in its place in rock and roll history. It's fantastic.
Yeah, completely.
That's why we do the show.
Quentin, of course you can. Hey Emmett, how you doing? Are you managing to fly yet? He digs our accents. Yeah. So yeah. Yes, Quentin's new bird, Emmett. That's very cool.
Well, when an Englishman says a new bird too, Quentin, it could be one of two things. It could be the feathered winged bird, or it could be a two-legged female bird. I got my bird.
Yeah. Bit outdated these days, but yes.
A very good friend of ours, Dave, he won't mind me saying this. And I always tell stories. He calls his girlfriend his bird.
Yeah. It's quite a northern thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We were having a conversation about some gear he bought, and he said I had to quickly hide it from my bird before my bird saw
it. Yeah. Yes, brings a whole new meaning to man down. Yes, it does.
Oh my God.
See, look, we're now back. Quentin, you'll like this. This is right in my street. Last night I was having a little sort of video conference with my family, so I had to download this app called House Party. I'll see if I can get it. I don't know if it'll focus.
Hold on.
And, come on. This is focusing on my bloody fingers, not on me. Not on. How do I get rid of me? Oh, that's not going to do it, is it? Just go right in, don't you, and then come out. Come on. Anyway, Quentin, the app underneath says "sex games for couples." You want to download the wrong app, you get something else entirely different.
I think the first time I met Quentin Simon, and Quentin might be able to correct me, but I'm sure he was having a live feed one night outside his apartment. He was doing a live feed where some people were breaking into a car, or they looked like they were breaking into a car, and the cops came. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, he was having an argument with the cops.
Yeah. A couple of years. Is that right, Quentin? You were having. Yeah, and
I remember him having an argument with the cops. Yeah, that's quite funny, very funny. Can he read? It's funny, isn't it? It's my wife. When I first met my wife, Caroline, she had a cockatiel. So for a while we had cockatiels. We had birds as well. I think they're particularly good to have around if you live on your own. I think Caroline lived on her own before we got together. So yeah, I presume, yeah. So anyway, that's it. This is my revelation for today. Is that kind of thing about the Blues Breakers and how we go back and we do it and things. And I like your show the other day. I watched your show the other day about about the zombies.
Yeah,
with Carl. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, they're an interesting group, aren't they? I Oracle Odyssey, I know recently, but their first. I'm not. Did you listen to their first album?
Yeah.
Their first album was a kind of, it goes from "I Got My Mojo Working" to "She's Not There," which is really. Do you know what I mean? It kind of "She's Not There" is not an R&B song in any way, shape, or form. It's a fantastic song. But it's not an R&B song, is it?
No.
You wouldn't go, "Oh look, rhythm and blues," would you? No, you don't listen to it and go R&B. And you think so. On the same album, they went from R&B, "I Got My Mojo Working," to that. How do you think? How do you? what is the creative process that says, okay, I started off, and they obviously started off like, all the other groups. It's on my First Amendment or something. Quentin pleading the first. And it's that, see, the great Vanzini's got that record. Have you? Great, fantastic, yeah. That it really interested me that kind of, is it because they had a keyboard player as their leader, not a guitar player?
No, I'm going to tell you why I think.
Go on.
And I'll
Go on.
Okay, because they understood very clearly what the blues movement was, and they understood very clearly what the Beatles were doing. So you're not there. She's not as a it's a poppy kind of song, it's gonna get the 13, 14-year-old girls, and then I've got my Mojo, Muddy Waters classic. You're gonna get you're gonna get the blues guys. So clearly these guys, the second wave, or the bands after the established bands that we already know, didn't have a problem with mixing music genres, Simon.
Okay. So you mean what you're saying is that she's not there, and you're right about it. She's not there could have been almost a Liverpool band kind of beat group song.
Yeah.
But they also they came out of the blues tradition.
Yeah.
Not like the Beatles, they came out of a rock and roll tradition.
And you couldn't see the Beatles doing that, could you?
What, I got my mojo working? No, no, absolutely not. And that's the interesting. Yeah, that's one of the interesting bits is that you don't see the Beatles, but you could see the Beatles doing "She's Not There."
Yes,
you could, couldn't you? All right. So there's a sort of all right. That's really interesting. So they're a hybridization of the Yardbirds and the Beatles, which is two slightly different.
So why do you think they did that from a commercial point of view? From the fact that they were musicians and music fans themselves, they wanted to cast their net, or was it this view that it didn't really matter? They weren't going to be self-contained, Simon. They weren't going to be labeled. I'm asking you. I don't know.
No idea. No, my feeling about it is that Hey, Todd, how you doing? Welcome indeed.
Hey, Todd. Good to see you again, Todd.
My feeling about it is that
wash your hands.
They just washed my hands already this morning. It's twice. Even though I've been out and all
oh, that's eye cleaner. That doesn't work, does it?
That's lens cleaner.
Oh.
I don't give much for your chances, Andrew. You're using lens cleaner.
I'm blind.
It's only a matter of minutes before the coronavirus gets past that.
Will that work? Lemon oil? No.
Okay. There's a whole lot of things.
Serious.
There's a whole lot of things that won't work, like garlic, eating garlic, rubbing garlic. No. That's not working. No, it's not. But, I think that it's just that probably not even a conscious thing. They probably just. I think what the Beatles did, which is we know that they promoted writing your own songs.
Big time. Yep.
So, but that is their their key thing. You're a band. One, you're a band. Two, you write your own songs.
Yep.
And I think that the Zombies are taking that from the Beatles, but they live in St Albans, which is in the orbit of London. Therefore, they're playing "I Got My Mojo Working" because their influence is from their locale is, and I bet you all those blues bands were coming up and playing in St Albans, which is 20 miles outside London,
of course.
So you've got the particularly London-centric R&B scene, yeah.
So you had a geographical location.
There's a geographical, yeah. And well, like, do you, this is really interesting. I think this is really interesting. I've been reading up on this because you know I'll go into it. The question before us is why did Liverpool, particularly Liverpool and Manchester, not produce any great blues bands? You know, see, I mean, and wherever you look, this is really, I think it's really interesting because in London, the R&B scene. I'm going to okay. You can see if you agree with this. In London, the R&B scene is developed through Chris Barber, the jazz scene. Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
What's the and you do skiffle, and then out of those skiffle bands comes Alexis Corner, Cyril Davis,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
start the blues clubs and all that. Yeah. So
Yes.
you've got that line now.
Yes.
That if you think about jazz musicians of jazz, there's one thing we can say about jazzers is they're serious. Yeah.
Big
They're
time.
serious,
Big time.
serious and scholarly and
Existentialists.
So what you get and personified by Eric Clapton completely is that kind of very serious. The reason he left the Yardbirds is because they're not playing the blues. I want to play the blues,
They're having too much fun.
and that. Well, they're having too much fun, and it's pop, not blues. And I am a serious
Yeah.
blues player. Therefore, so there's this whole kind of, it's a bit like the early English folk scene. It's quite serious, kind of song collection, kind of scholarly attitude to it.
Change the world.
Moving into blues, now. So that you've got that self-contained in London R&B scene, rhythm and blues scene. Yeah, really set up by Alexis Corner, Cyril Davis, and running their blues club. And into that, obviously, there's the Yardbirds, there's John Mayall, there's the Stones, there's all those things. They all come from like art school backgrounds, and they all aspire to those kind of serious blues things. Now, let's leg it out to the provinces. So let's take some other blues bands a minute. So let's take the Animals. Well, you think the Animals come from Newcastle. Does this still work for them? Well, oddly, it does still work for them. I don't know if you picked this up in your thinking Animals, but the Animals had a reciprocal arrangement with I can't remember. What's the Polish guy who managed the Yardbirds?
Gromowski.
Yeah. Well, they had a reciprocal link that the Yardbirds would go and play in Newcastle, and the Animals would come and play in London. So the Animals went to London and never went back. But so they got a sort of link to London, and that kind of but very much they were covering not only blues style, they were covering Nina Simone songs and quite serious. So but they've got that link to London. So they look to London to as the leader of that R&B sort of scene. Whereas in the Northwest, Beatles and Manchester and all that, what's going on is slightly different. It's a bit more working class. It's a bit more. It comes from from playing in rock and roll bands. So there's rock and roll, which is a certain amount of fun, a certain amount of and I think we can say, here we are, going to be contentious now, a bit, and we can say that the London musicians were of a higher caliber than people from the provinces. Now, I'm putting that, by all means argue, I'm fine. But, if we go, and we just talked about it in a sense, Eric Clapton, in a blues sense, is a better guitar player than George Harrison. Yeah? He's a better guitar player than Tony Clark from the Hollies. He's a better guitar than Hilton Valentine from the Animals. Yeah? I'm not doing, I'm not doing those guys down to different things, but, Giorgio Gomelski, thank you. Yes, that's him. I can't remember his name. But the point about that is that they're coming. There's a slight kind of, they although they started off with skiffle, they went to rock and roll, not to blues. And there's a lot, in the provinces, there's a lot less scholarly kind of curation of that than there was in London. As I say, with Alexis Corner, John Mayle, with they're curating the blues, as a kind of thing, to be nurtured and and grown, and whereas in the provinces, the Beatles were playing, 1960, they were playing in Hamburg, rock and roll, because people wanted to dance. So they're playing in dance halls. They're not playing in clubs, but they're playing dance halls. Although, there's a crossover in the dancing. I'm not, and even bands like the Who and stuff like that started off as R&B bands, quite quickly got into their own things because they started, and this is the influence of the Beatles. They started writing their own songs. As soon as you start writing your own songs, things other than the blues come out. So I think that there's a sort of class thing going on. There's a kind of middle class aspirational thing going on in the blues scene in London that is not there in Liverpool.
And
they weren't working class, but they aspirationally.
So from what I understand, like the Animals were big in Newcastle, but they didn't make it. They didn't get their recording contract until they came to London, and got involved in the R&B scene early in London. And their first song, "House of the Rising Sun," again caused a lot of problems with a lot of the record executives. One thing we got to remember too, Simon, is everyone talks about "Light My Fire" and the Led Zeppelin song, being too long for the radio. But we got to remember that "House of the Rising Sun" was 4 minutes, and that was a lot. That was two songs, Simon.
Two sides, wasn't it? Two sides of the single. Didn't you have part 2 and part 2? You did, didn't you?
Yeah, but two songs, because an average radio song was 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So
groundbreaking.
I think this is worth elaborating and discussing in more shows, because I certainly believe, this is my belief. I always believed that the working class guys in London who gravitated to the blues did so because it was presented to them by the art school guys. Now a lot of the art school guys that we know, a lot of them came from working class families, but they went into an institution,
They had aspiration, didn't they? An aspiration to move up. Yeah, completely.
And presented them with something that they could dance to. Yeah. I'm not arguing with you. I think definitely the fact that you had guys that were trained musicians. Look at Jack Bruce, for example. Jack Bruce could read music. He was a trained musician. Ginger Baker was a trained musician. Steve, what's his name? The guy, Steve Winwood, trained musician.
Yeah. Whereas, I think John Lennon was quite sneery about jazz, wasn't he? He was quite, so there's a kind of, anti-jazz thing. And as I say, because the blues thing, the R&B thing came out of jazz, Chris Barber and all of that, that you got this kind of serious and quite London-centric, serious kind of, blues, authentic blues. I mean, Clapton is the classic, or Mr. Authentic Blues. I'm leaving the Yardbirds because they're not authentic blues, and I want to play authentic blues. As a thing, it's that it creates a different. What you get is something different. you know.
Oh,
And
I'm going to defend the Beatles here, and
no, I'm not
yeah,
attacking
yeah,
the Beatles.
yeah.
I'm just saying
No,
that
no, yeah, I know that. Yeah,
what they
I'm
did
going.
was different. Oh no, please.
I'm
No.
going to defend the Beatles in the context of what you've just highlighted, because one of the great things about the Beatles, and I always use this as a defense when I would meet guys who used to say to me, Beatles are Rolling Stones. And for a long, long time,
Oh
I was
yeah,
always a Beatles kind of guy, and people were saying, and I'd say, no, the Beatles had played 350 gigs by the time the Rolling Stones had formed. They were playing all night sets. But more importantly, Simon, they weren't just playing blues, they were playing songs. You listen to their first album. So the song, they were
yeah,
singing girl band songs.
yeah.
They had Paul
Motown
McCartney
stuff and all that
crooning
stuff. Yeah,
for the
yeah,
girls, and the girls would all
yeah,
run up to the stage and go, oh, when Paul was crooning.
yeah,
And then they
yeah.
had John Lennon and Paul McCartney doing bloody Johnny Be Good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
So
completely. Yeah. But I think that you're right. I mean, the other thing you bring up is there's a kind of the first thing Brian Epstein. The first thing he does with the Beatles is to get your hair cut, get in a suit. So
yeah,
he cleans up their image a bit, doesn't he? So they're in that kind of slightly. And you said this to me before, and it makes sense that that in that wider kind of if you like musical showbiz tradition, yeah, making a living, yeah, from show business,
yeah.
being in the musical.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's but that's in a long tradition. And as you pointed out, that kind of music show tunes. I'm Jerry and the Pacemakers. Did ferry across the Mersey from Carousel, isn't it? I mean, it's a show tune basically, not an R&B song by some distance. It's and I think that those things, that whereas the Stones, had leather jackets and kind of long hair and stuff like that, that there was a kind of rebellious and therefore edge to them that Epstein tried to sort of take out of the Beatles in a way, managed it for a few years. Then they all got into drugs and, growing beards and Sergeant Pepper's, which is, so kind of, that kind of, but that he didn't take away that experimentation and that quest. And I think that's the other side of it, that, the questing spirit, write your own songs. And when you write your own songs, they don't sound like.
Look at that. So Andrew Luke Oldham was paying for these billboards.
Really? Wow, I didn't know that.
Must have been.
Watch the Stones crush the Beatles. Was it Stone crush the Beatles? Was it singular or plural?
Wow.
How interesting. Yeah. Setting up that kind of
wow.
That kind of yeah. But so it is. I think jazz was big in the 50s, beat poetry, yeah. Wait a minute, Kubler. I just think the jazz was big in the 50s, so with the beat poets of that time period, like Alan Blues, and that's how the Beatles got their name. I see, because they were beat groups. Yeah. The Beatles got their name because it's about being a beat group.
Oh yeah. And a homage to the Crickets too, because they loved.
That's right. Yeah, the Crickets as a kind of insect related name, wasn't it? Yeah. I don't know who suggested changing the two E's to an E and an A.
No, I think those are valid points, Simon, and I'd love to draw them out more, because I think, certainly I've read a couple of books recently where they talk about the roads and the highways in London in the early 60s facilitating movement between bands so that bands could, travel from up north down to London, 4 or 5 times a week. And I'm not a Marxist at all, but I think a Marx a class analysis certainly is a viable option for us to talk about the British blues and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, because John Lennon tried to hide his middle class roots. We all know that. Mick Jagger tried to hide his working class, his middle class roots too, and it was a bone of contention between Mick and Keith for a long time. But having said that, though, I think the fact that you've got different music genres coming from a trained musician's perspective, which could or could not be related back to class, is definitely a key thing. You got to remember Liverpool too, Simon, was a big port, and I for one could never understand why they didn't have a big blues scene in Liverpool. Yeah. But they never had a big blues scene.
No, and I think that's why, because their music didn't come out of that jazz and skiffle and blues. Yeah. It wasn't curated by slightly older guys like Alexis Corner, Chris Barber. Doing all that. Then it didn't have any. So what happened is it hopped on the youth rebellion thing in a sense, and it then, which was more the rock and roll thing than the blues thing. Yeah. So, because there's a difference, isn't it? I mean, Muddy Waters is different to Chuck Berry.
Big time.
They're the same, but different, but it's a really interesting, different, and that thing about, nobody ripped up the seats from a cinema going to see a blues thing, but they did to go and see Bill Haley.
That's correct.
A bit weird, doesn't it? Bill Haley.
Yeah. And Eddie Cochran. Eddie Cochran was just, wherever he went, there was mayhem and chaos.
Yeah, completely. In the kind of, and the Elvis, obviously the apex of that is Elvis. But that is about the post-war zeitgeist, the post-war new, things are starting to turn into colour.
Yeah.
Whereas
youth culture, young people
youth culture, young people, having their
money,
own thing, having their own thing.
Having
whereas
some coin,
a break with the past, not being jazz, not being, now we've got our own thing. Now that, and in terms of youth culture, whereas obviously if you look at the, that kind of early R&B scene, there is a line, a more conservative line through it. Until people start, and you either do what Eric did, which is I'm going to play the blues, and kind of, or you get into, in a sense, taking us back to full circle, but the Zombies, where you're playing I Got My Mojo Working, because that's where you've come from, and that's the kind of scene you're in. But you've just written a song that isn't like that at all, and interestingly, For Your Love, here we are, obviously the Yardbirds. Who was For Your Love written by?
Jimmy Page.
No, For Your Love, the Yardbirds with the with the harpsichord and all of that. That Eric Clapton was so sneery about. Do you know
who wrote this? No, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Graham Gouldman. Graham Gouldman, who was from 10cc.
Oh.
And where are 10cc from? They're from Manchester.
Yeah.
So in a sense, they don't have. He doesn't have that. It's got to be Eric, Mr. Serious Bluesman. He hasn't got that because he comes from Manchester, where it's rock and roll, where it's, and all of a sudden, and writing your own songs. So I've written this song. It's called For Your Love. It's got this harpsichord on it, and it has this, it has the E, G, A kind of thing. E, G, A minor. And that's not a rock and roll chord changes at all. But that's fine. I don't need to do that. I'm writing songs for myself and doing something else. So you've got, as I say, because he comes from Manchester, therefore he's not in that purist blues lineage.
I just want to just answer a few comments, Simon, in the chat before we continue.
Sorry, sorry guys, I got on a roll there.
But we're in for a treat, guys, and especially you too, Kubrick lover. I'm going to let a little bit of the cat out of the bag, because the great Vanzini played in some jazz bands in the mid 1970s. So the next time Simon and I do a show next week, he's going to jump on and give us a
brilliant.
first-hand share first-hand experiences about why and how he went from playing rock and roll and British blues to jazz fusion. So don't tell us in the
Greg
chat.
Lanzini backing Stomu Yamashtu.
Yeah.
as well for the teenagers.
So don't tell us anything in the chat, Great Vanzini. But no. I look. I think you're right, Simon. I think there is there's a great understanding there between what was happening in London, and these guys having to come from the provinces to break into the blues scene to get record contracts. And then you had London guys, like you said, the guys that were in the Zombies, who went from playing classic R&B, doing a fantastic version of it, and then playing Beatlesque stuff, and then a year later playing psychedelia.
Yeah. And I think I'll make the point that the Who, the Kinks, they all did this. They did the same thing. They started. The Who and the Kinks started off as R&B bands and all of that. When they started off, doing interestingly, playing. The Who played blues and stuff like that. When they first started off, and yet as soon, but they soon moved out of that, and soon they had, the Who were doing "Can't Explain," which is, not a blues song by a distance, and and the Kinks, You Really Got Me and all of that stuff. They soon got away from Long Tall Sally, and they soon got into writing. When Ray Davies started writing his own stuff, and then interestingly, he had all that musical stuff and the stuff from his childhood and his siblings that filtered back in. Very English kind of musical stuff, which then is not the blues. But it's, if you listen to Ray Davies's melodies, they are much more music hall than they are blues changes, which they aren't. But it's interesting that nexus of R&B and that gave a lot of bands a kick start. But as ever with bands, they soon it soon kind of you could say the same about punk, can't you? Punk lasted like 2 years, and then it started to be. Then people started to do other stuff. That 3 chord, all downstrokes kind of fast guitar playing.
And, shit, Simon, you went from punk, for 2. Then you went into the Human League and Visage and Midge, playing all this electronica. It was just remarkable. 1 minute you were wearing your black jacket to a party and Anarchy on the back of it, and a week later you were wearing flare, pointy and Do
you see my point? But it does bear a comparison. 63 to 66 is those 3 years. Are a massive kaleidoscope of change in music. What you started off in 63 doing, and all those bands, the Stones, what they were doing in 63 is not what they were doing in 66. Was it? By a distance. They started to get students to write their own songs, then they started to get their own sound, then they started, they retained their roots in R&B, but I would argue that Satisfaction is a rock song and not an R&B song.
Oh, big time. Big time.
Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose we're going to be too contentious.
Oh no! And in fact, I would say that was a line in the sand between the Rolling Stones saying, "This is who we are now." Yeah. No, phenomenal connection. maybe quickly before we move on to something else, because I don't want to get tied down on this, because I think maybe you could talk about this more and more. But I've been asking this question for a long time. What is it about England, the English music scene, that can go from 1963 to 1965 and have a complete turnaround, from 1978 to 1981 having a complete turnaround in what is popular as far as cool music? When other parts of the world, like Australia and New Zealand and parts of Canada, were discovering Pink Floyd in 1973, when you guys were in 1981 playing Human League.
Yeah. I think that it's about and especially, the 60s were at, and we've talked about this before, the 60s were a kind of, that post-war, we've come out of the 50s, the black and white, the 50s, we've come out of rationing, people no longer had to go into the army, no people now do national service. And, the explosion in post-war art schools, the explosion in fashion, the explosion in youth culture, the thing called, for the first time ever, there's something called youth culture. And those things all combine to, so that the creative explosion with a new generation, this applies to punk as well, but, and I've argued on here that the interesting thing, it comes out of skiffle, rock and roll and skiffle is basically, and punk, there's a direct line back, from as far as I'm concerned, from punk to rock and roll. Quite rock and roll changes, fast, quite simple to play, not long solos, not, but short stuff, and punchy. And I think the punk thing's different because of the more socially conscious lyrics, but the late 60s had lots of socially conscious lyrics, so I'm not underestimating that. But I don't think it's part social realism, and is not part of the rock and roll experience. I don't think, particularly. I mean, there are exceptions. 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. Yeah, it's probably about that. But I can think of that's the example I can think of. But I'm sure for the most part, Johnny B. Good. Well, actually, that's a bit of a social thing about what's going on with somebody, but not quite, no future for you and me kind of thing. Not quite in the same way as the Sex Pistols. So, but I think that, when these things like, they start off as small, tight knit, and they go like that. They flower. It's like a flower coming out. But what happens is, they start off very, tight and purist. So, the Beatles are doing rock and roll, and they start off doing rock and roll, and and then, and I think this is the one of the big things is, you start writing your own stuff, and it doesn't matter almost who you are, unless you're doing formulaic stuff. But these guys are not doing formulaic. They're just writing songs. Jagger and Richards get locked in the kitchen told, write a song. They didn't get told, write a 12-bar rhythm and blues song. They just got told to write a song, didn't they? Don't come out till you've written one. The Beatles the same. They just wrote songs, with what they had. But that means that you start writing your songs, and you can do this, and then the next time you've changed a bit. You've moved on, so you had experiences, so you do a bit more, and all of a sudden, the Zombies are a very good example. They've gone from Mojo to She's Not There, on the same album. And then within, a year, whatever it is later, they've recorded Odyssey and Oracle, which is not even, well, I suppose it has a root in She's Not There, but you're right, very sort of psychedelic. So, within, 67, 4 years, 63, 67, you've gone from that to, and I think it's all those things. It's not one thing, it's all of them have, that kind of, that zeitgeist that means that people are massive creative because they've been given the freedom to be creative.
Oh,
Yeah,
I think
you know, the
you've hit the
'60s
nail
there
on the
was, you
head.
know,
I
there's a
think it's a
lot of
great
that in
thing
art schools.
that there was a political movement in England that was supported by the Labour government to bring in, and again, I want to echo. We've discussed
And
this many times. The art
interestingly,
schools.
yeah, the art schools and all of that, you know, and that
Yeah,
kind of white hot
yeah,
technical revolution, which is Harold Wilson's thing. And interestingly, coming at it the other way, I don't you probably I don't know if you know this. Punk, punk. The reason that punk took off, one of the reasons that punk took off, is because in 1977 you could get something. Oh, I'm going to forget what it's called. You could get a job creation allowance, right?
sure.
Which was like it give you 40 quid a week to start your own business. Now this is a
That's
Mrs.
correct.
Thatcher thing, yeah. Now,
Yes,
obviously, what that meant is that you could have a lot of musicians who could sit around with 40 quid a week and learn how to learn how to play the guitar and write songs. They did it on the
UB40
cheap.
class. UB40
Classic
classic
UB40. See,
example.
what's in a name? Oh yes,
Yeah,
that. And so, you know, but all those guys, they're all on the dole, young kids on the dole. You know, we've been through a period of recession and stuff like that. So there's,
yeah.
you know, there's, you know, not much going on. So somebody's created this job creation allowance sort of thing, which enables these guys, as I say, to, well, let's, you know, we're not doing anything else. There's a load of disaffected youth. Let's form a band. Now, you know, so when you form a band, when you initially form a band, there's, you know, you take your cues from whoever, like the Clash, the Sex Pistols, you know, the Ramones, the people who came first. But that's only going to last. You're only going to be able to do that for the first 10 minutes, and then it's going to be something else. But also, the I would say that early versions of the Human League, yeah, the Human League came from Sheffield, which is an industrial town in the north, and they took synthesizers as a kind of, you know, I don't need to be a musician to play a synthesizer. I can go da 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 da. You know, it's quite simple to do. You know, it's like, I think it's a simple thing. I can make a noise. I can press a key down. I can make a noise. Now, then I've got to make a melody. Well, I just make a melody. You know,
Oh yeah, but I
and
think there's
you
that
know,
artistic movement too that was behind the New Romantics. That was a direct
a fashion
about
thing. The New
turn.
Romantics is a fashion
Yeah,
thing, I
yeah,
think. You
yeah,
know, but
yeah,
yeah.
you know,
Clothes.
it was a direct
60s.
about turn from the streetism that you had from the punk movement. You know, everyone was tidy and clean. You know, it was designer clothes, and you know the music, the synthesizer was a big instrument. You know, Gary Numan comes along, but
Gary
I
Newman,
think
yeah.
what we have to remember too is that the British Empire didn't get to be the British Empire because it was a silly. It was a silly empire. They understood very clearly the economic interests in having an entertainment industry, and we saw that when the Beatles, Simon, got the MBEs. You know, they were patted on the back by the establishment for
Yeah.
helping contribute
Selling
to
it
the
to America, yeah.
GDP
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
Britain.
Yeah.
And we saw that legacy continue right through the 70s and the 60s. You know, Margaret Thatcher, despite what she was doing to the economy, realized, and there was this distillation of responsibility there from your political leaders to look after the creative aspirations of the young people. You know, so that's why
Yeah.
UB40 could go and get the unemployment benefit, write a song, learn to play the saxophone. These guys had no musical instruments. Go out there, write a song, and become $1 million. $1 million band overnight.
Oh, yeah, completely. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Should we just I want to address some of the comments in the in the thing? It. I think it's something what you say. I think punk, you know, and Kubit Lover made another point about Eddie Van Halen gave a shot in the arm to bring rock and roll back to the people. I might argue that Eddie Van Halen is actually is the opposite of that in a funny kind of way. Not personally, but technically, because I think that Eddie Van Halen is the first great technical rock guitarist.
Sure.
You, I might be wrong. I'm happy to say nonsense, but that's what I feel about Eddie Van Halen. That he is the start of the great technical. Where people teaches the great technical, the start of the great technical revolution in guitar playing that we see up until now. Amazing technical players. That's my feeling about Eddie Van Halen as a thing. Great Vanzini says that you're right. The Zombies did record Odyssey and Oracle right after Sgt. Pepper's, and on the same 4-track machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nonsense I got in my head, but
yeah, it's just a phenomenal album. Phenomenal.
Yeah, amazing. And so what is? I mean, the British were heavily influenced by American music, yeah, and American music was heavily influenced by British music. In terms, we sold them back the blues,
Sure,
but also beat groups, and they then, took it somewhere else. I mean, I was listening to just a small example, but I was listening to Steve Van Zandt, Bruce Springsteen's guitar player. He has a radio show, American Garage radio show. Well, he had Bruce Springsteen on it, and they were talking about "I Want to Hold Your Hand." When they heard "I Want to Hold Your Hand," this kind of explosion, went on. About what they might do, what they might be able to do.
Oh, that's right. Tom Petty has a very good synopsis of why he started a band. He's a young guy. He's hanging around with Elvis. His uncle gets him onto a show or a film set when standing there, 12 years old, and Elvis is there. He loves music, and he's thinking, how the hell can I get into music? What can I do? And then all of a sudden, he's one of the millions of Americans sitting there, and the Beatles stand there in a group, and he goes, "That's how."
That's
and
it.
Band.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to get into the music.
And I would say that, like I'd say the same about punk, that when you see it as a kid, age 14, one of the things I think you say about that is, I could do that.
Well, you've just answered your question, Simon. You opened the show with Eric Clapton going around with the Marshall JTM 45 amp in the back of his car. You've answered your question. And guys going...
But you see what I mean? But 14-year-old kids were, going, I could do that. I could play something like that. Hey, I wonder if I could be as big as that, big as the Beatles, it's a sort of thing, isn't it, that you do. It's... That's right. Kubrick was Van Sant was in The Sopranos. Yeah.
It's my favorite TV program series ever. I've watched that series 10 times. Kubrick lover, I love it. Silvio, you got it, Arvin. And my gosh, I couldn't believe it when that series came out and they said it was him. I'm going, what, really? And then they showed him going through the makeup process. Oh my God, it is him.
Yeah. With the hair. I don't think Steve Van Zandt had hair for a while.
No. My mother was a music promoter and she promoted Carl Perkins until he got tied up with the Beatles. Wow.
That's right, because Carl Perkins was a great hero of George Harrison's, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in a rock and roll.
Yeah.
Again, rock and rolling. Yeah. But it's that's interesting, John. Your mother was what sort of music promotion? She did rock and roll promotion, did she, in the 50s? Stuff. Oh, I'd like to hear about that. My new shy, band bookings in the 50s in the US. Yeah. Wow. I mean,
no, I think you've answered the question, Simon. I think accessibility certainly to what young people or anyone is seeing. I can do that. That's what I can do, Simon. You go to a Velvet Underground gig. I can do that.
Yeah. Whereas when you go and see Eddie Van Halen for the first time,
I can't do that, Simon.
is that, don't you? And I think that, you know, please don't get me wrong, it's not particularly my thing, but I understand where Eddie Van Halen stands, and that the pantheon of great rock guitar players. He's a great rock guitar player. I mean, what he did, where he took it, completely get that. As I say, it's not particularly my thing, but that's fine. Not everything is, not everything can. But so, I think that, as I say, that with the Beatles, you sit there and you go, I could do that. With Eddie Van Halen, you sit there and go, what the is that? And you have to work at being able to get that stuff together. And lots of people did. I had fair play,
So do we take it one step further in our conversations and say, well, is it the type of who is the audience that's going to watch these artists and gigs in the first place, Simon? Because I would argue that 99% of the people that were going to go and watch Van Halen in 1978 were young people drinking beer, and it was about a party. People that were going to go and watch the Velvet Underground in 1969, 68, weren't necessarily going there to watch a party.
But the answer to that is yes, they were, because
a different party.
The Velvet Underground were playing Andy Warhol happenings, which are basically art parties. But let's not get hung up on the art bit. Let's go for the. It's still about.
Hey, Hack.
Let face facts. Guitar Hack, how you doing? Hope you're good. It's still about dance. It's still about it's a bit more about art as well. But the Beatles are about art when they did Sgt. Pepper's.
So it's
let's
a different
not pretend
party.
They weren't. So it's a slightly different party. It's not just a dance party.
Sure.
Yeah. It's not just purely that kind of release. There is there's an art to it. But I would say you're right. It's a different kind of party, but slightly, but still a party. People are going along because it's a happening. People went to happenings at the Fillmore West. Took a lot of drugs and hang out with Grateful Dead. I might argue that with a lot of psychedelic lighting and stuff like that, it's not so far removed from I know context is some of the things where. So if you go to the Velvet Underground, you'll watch they'll have a Andy Warhol film projected on over them, kind of thing, rather than oils and kind of But
Yep.
I'm arguing that there's not a huge difference between the two. One is abstract, kind of, psychedelic, and the other's a bit more, film of, is a kind of art thing. I shot a 3-hour film about, looking at a tower block kind of thing.
I think the audience is an interesting component to the gig. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the audience that helps create the legacy or the image of the band or the gig itself, or is it the band? Because if you look at the Yardbirds, for example, and we started the show talking about the Yardbirds, these guys were scratching their heads going, what the heck's going on? Because half the guys that were turning up at the Yardbird gigs were going there to look at Eric Clapton play a guitar, Simon. People never they would go to the gigs to drink beer and dance, but
no, but well, they didn't. But those, that we know that that was still important to those, because that's an important element of the blues. That John Lee Hooker thing, banging your foot on the floor.
Watching the artist, watching the guitar player. So that's important.
But those guys, people like John Lee Hooker and, whatever, one of their basic functions when they played was to get people to dance.
Sure.
People danced to Robert Johnson. People danced to John Lee Hooker. And, that, as I say, that John Lee Hooker banging your foot, that is about a beat, a bass drum. Go on,
the point that I was trying to make, Simon, is that half the people were coming to watch the Yardbirds not to dance, but to just stand there and watch Eric Clapton play.
Well, yeah. There's the bloke. Yes, the musicians group who are. Yeah.
So over here, you had half the people, that were doing what you would normally do at a gig in the mid 1960s in the UK. But and according to John Mayall, from what he heard, that upset some of the other Yardbirds, the bass player in particular, and Chris Drazier.
Chris Drazier, yeah.
They were a little bit upset that people were,
standing over on Eric's side of the stage.
So again, I'm going to go back to your first point that you open up the show with. So that upset a lot of guys in the Yardbirds, but it didn't upset John Mayall. John Mayall was quite happy to take that and run with it.
Because he's in that kind of more, I'm doing a purist blues thing, so therefore that, somebody playing the guitar and, who's really good, who I can get people to come and watch and go, look at that, it's, that's a thing. Could I say, great Vanzini, great comment here. They didn't hold their lighters up for the Velvet Underground. No, that's true. And indeed, Kubrick Lover, you don't dance to Stairway to Heaven, or yes, Smoke on the Water. So I'll drag you into the world of Simon Williams. He's 16 years old in 1974 in Bristol, England. Every Wednesday night, we used to go to a local nightclub called Tiffany's, and it had Wednesday night was heavy rock night.
Wow!
Where the guy there, Andy Fox, used to play rock, basically. And do you know what? We danced, and we danced to Smoke on the Water.
I can honestly say I never have.
I've done other
things to
You're younger and more
Stairway to Heaven.
Yes, Stairway to Heaven, not a dance number. I give you that. As what's interesting, if you listen to, if you listen to Led Zeppelin at the BBC, live at the BBC, Robert Plant announces, this is at Stairway to Heaven, to kind of polite applause, and people sat on the floor and watched.
Yes,
I think when they're like, was there any of this kind of lotus swaying? They just sat and watched.
And I'll tell you why they sat there and watched, Simon, because that feeds into that jazzer, serious existentialist blues tradition, which still carried on. Still, despite the psychedelic scene coming in, there was still this thing of, we're going to go along. There's a classic gig where the...
Good night, Todd. Take care, mate.
Good night,
Stay
Todd.
Safe.
Where Led Zeppelin are playing in a Scandinavian country, Denmark.
Yeah.
And they're playing their first album, and it's in a small, intimate club, and it's fantastic. It's in black and white, and everyone's just sitting there. It's amazing, Simon.
I know, because you don't think of it like that. You think of stadiums, you think of people, everybody's, and all of that. Yeah, you don't sit there and and it's like, you don't think of it as being like a jazz gig, do you? Kind of thing, where people sit, they watch, people play. At the end, polite applause, go on to the next one.
See you, Todd.
And you, it's, because that the kind of the what is it? The sort of the learnt behaviour of going to a gig.
Wow.
In 1967 had not been learnt, because
unless you're a young girl peeing your pants.
Well, I was going to say, there's two different things. But you see, but that's not serious. Yeah.
No.
That's pop. Yeah, pop is and we're screaming and kind of, and there's the and then there's the, and remember, we can't overestimate this as a in 1967 there was the serious rock world, start of the serious rock world.
That's correct.
Whatever it is.
That's correct. Yes. Thank you. I might watch that this weekend.
See, Arvin's with me. We danced to covers band playing Smoke on the Water. Thank you, Arvin. I thought I would be a man alone. Thank God there's somebody else to back me up. Make me feel not quite too.
Arvin should qualify that. He's probably the guitar player in the band playing it while he's dancing.
Oh. Okay, so I still am the only person. Okay, fine. and we were god awful dancers too. Certainly, Arvin. Yes. No, I'm
It
not
didn't
making any
matter.
claims of the brilliance of my dancing to
Just so long as the girl that you were dancing next to kept in the same tempo with
yeah.
you, it was all good, Simon.
And could I say, in 1973, 74, women went to these clubs. Ha! It wasn't quite the male preserve that possibly it became later. Fortunately, that's probably a good thing about punk as well. Punk appealed to girls, I think, more than. More, yeah. But
Hey,
see,
mate. It's all fair for me, my friend.
see, and Kubrick lovers now admitting that he's danced the Stairway to Heaven at his senior prom. Ha! See, slow dance to Stairway to Heaven at my senior prom in high school. See, you've all done it. You've just wiped it from your memories. Why wouldn't you? No, I mean, I think that's wonderful. It's wonderful. The girls were awful too. Oh, but how can you say such a thing? There are no awful girls when you're 15 or 16. That doesn't happen.
Oh, well, Simon, yes, yeah.
Yes, John. You see, yes, John.
Yes.
Precisely. You see, absolutely. So there was something. Oh dear, that's wonderful. But yeah, sadly, in 1973, 74, that passed for entertainment. In mid-70s. Sadly, well, not sadly, that's just what we did. Because we didn't really go. We went to rock. We didn't go to discos, nightclubs. See, comfortably numb at the prom as well. Kubrick lover. Wow, that's quite a stretch. Yes. See, John Harding got the right idea. See, but in a sense, that's what bar bands and stuff are about, aren't they? They're about providing an atmosphere for drinking beer, chatting up women, and dancing. That's
Can't
yes,
go wrong.
It's I've my in
It's
the
amazing
band,
what
in the
happens
covers
when
band.
4 pints of beer have been consumed, Simon.
Yeah. Oh, but Ian, the singer in my old band, that's exactly what he used to say about. He used to say, guys, people looking to go out, guys particularly looking to go out, have a good time, few beers, chat up a girl. That's what it is. And you've got to provide the music for it, chaps.
It'll be interesting to see what Great Van Zanny says when he comes on the show next, Simon, about what the jazz fusion scene we're doing. Obviously, we've got an idea what the jazzers were doing in the mid 1970s, probably. But you don't have to answer this now, Great Van Zanny. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what jazzers in North America were doing. I've seen, just as a sort of like a semi segue, I've seen that Jaco Pastorius film recently, and he's played at a couple of concerts, open air gigs, and people are dancing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What's his? Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I think that I mean, jazz. Let's be fair, came out of dance.
Sure.
The early jazz stuff, and
Ragtime and all
Louis
that.
Armstrong, ragtime.
Yep.
They were all dance. They were all for dancing.
It was all
they were
dancing, Simon.
a soundtrack for dancing. Benny Goodman, new swing stuff in the 40s, all dance. It's only in the 50s. I mean, even bebop and sort of modern jazz, which not so much for dancing, I would feel, but I'm happy to be proved wrong. But but then you get that the dancing has never gone away. I mean, you've got Motown in the 60s, and R&B, Motown, all those things. They were for dancing. All those Ready Steady Go shows and all of that. And what are people doing? They're dancing. Sure. They're dancing to whoever's on. But they're dancing. And into my ear, and I just made a joke about going to rock clubs. But there were loads of discos. Discos in the 70s. That played. The the hits, the pop hits of the day, and certainly going on through the 70s, and then obviously disco hit, and then, which is just a continuation of that whole dance music tradition.
I look forward, Simon, to giving your synopsis some more thought. I think the link that you made between what happened in Liverpool as far as blues music and what didn't happen, what happened in London, and linking that back to that this album here. So I'm getting the impression, and I'm quite excited about this because I'm a Clapton nut and I love this album, and the fact that you're making another layered dig into what this album was, is fascinating.
And what it did, what it
fascinating.
did for people, that it, what it promoted, and one, it promoted Eric Clapton as the guitar man,
Yeah.
The start of Eric is, Clapton is God kind of thing. It promoted, alongside that, it then promoted the kit that you needed to have to be a serious, to be a serious blues god, or a serious blues musician, and everybody did, didn't they? Everybody had, after that, everybody got a Les Paul and that Marshall combo to crank it up, and and nobody did that beforehand. So and then that then came, all those bands that came after, like
so Simon, when I was 24 years old, and I got told by a guy that I worked with that Eric Clapton and that album were instrumental for Black Sabbath and Jimmy Page, I remember laughing at this guy saying, "What are you? You're nuts! You're crazy! What are you talking about?"
But but you see, yes, I mean, I think that it's interesting that, I think that, Clapton, Page, Beck, they all come, we've talked about it, they all come from that little corner, of England, that little southwest corner of England, a few miles from each other. And so they've all grown up at the same time, they're all pretty much the same age, same influences and all of that,
all knew each other.
All knew each other, and went into the same bands. Interestingly, that's quite an interesting thing as well. A lot of swapping around of people in bands and stuff. There's a lot of sort of incestuous behaviour in a band sense going on. And I think that you're right. That without that that album and that whole persona, featuring Eric Clapton, really pinpoints the start of the guitar hero thing, in a what we think of as the 70s way, so first Clapton, then obviously Page, Beck, Hendrix, and all of a sudden you've got these guys who are Paul Kossoff from Free, and lots of other people.
What did you think of Vanzini's conversation with us on the last show, where he talked about how he got that album through his brother, and the radio stations at that time, they weren't playing this music. It was only because people were ringing up saying, "Play Jimmy Page." I mean, all these buddy Jimmys. Play Jimi Hendrix. These radio stations in America, and that was a little bit of an epiphany for me, because sometimes we can easily fall into some complacency in thinking that the radio stations were the vanguard, that they were the reason why these bands were successful in the first place. But great Vanzini painted a picture for us, Simon, by saying, well, look, young cats were buying these albums and they were distributing it, and other people were saying, well, look, let's ring up the radio station and say, Simon, can you play Eric Clapton? And then Simon saying no, and then 50 phone calls And then someone realizing, okay, well, it's revenue here. Okay, so you'll play Jimi Hendrix. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that alongside, if you think about it, that the advent of, what is it? I can't remember which way around it is. AM radio, with rock stations, yeah, is kind of 67, isn't it? 67,
Yeah.
68.
Yeah.
So, and then because that is the start of the albums over singles. So you've got, previous to that, you've got basically singles radio, yeah, like you have now. Basically, it's the same thing, but you've got singles radio.
Yeah.
So it's,
no one buys
you've got
albums
that
anymore.
So nobody. So no, they do, but you've got singles radio, yeah, and they played singles, the Beatles singles, Beatles. So then you have to have, people start making longer tracks. They start making, I mean, the Blues Breakers didn't have hit singles. I don't know if they, I can't remember. They probably didn't put out hit singles, So, serious, that's the whole thing about, serious musicians don't put out singles kind of thing, So, obviously Led Zeppelin sort of did as well. I didn't really see a bit, but so you needed somewhere to, you talked about it a bit earlier, where, you had 6, 7, 8 minute songs, or concept albums. People, so you've got Sergeant Pepper's coming out, and it needed to be heard in its entirety. So you needed a different kind of radio station that would be able to do that. And that was, is it AM radio started that, or is it FM? I can't remember which way around it is.
FM started it.
It was FM. So, and so the FM radio station started, their, what they started off doing was being A, playing album tracks, B, playing whole albums sometimes, they got the first Doors album and they might play it all, a few times kind of thing. So I think there's a complete, alongside this kind of, this, as AM couldn't play anything over 3.5, yeah. FM was 68. There we are. Great. That sounds about right, doesn't it? It's following on. It is. The album starts to become really important. So radio has to find a way of, and as we've discussed on here, there's a market. And when you see, and when there's a market for things, people will step into that market. And bands obviously, they wanted to sell their stuff. Sell their albums to people. Yeah, and. They, so that radio followed that, and so you had albums being played on the radio, because that's what albums are becoming the thing.
Well,
when they weren't in the past.
I just want to echo what these guys are saying in the chat. So I watched that documentary that was on Netflix a while ago about Rush.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's phenomenal. That band was popular because they went and toured at high schools. They never got radio play. And yet they were going to, concerts, playing live, and all the young kids were going, wow, this is fantastic. Radio hated them.
You have to go out and find your audience, and I think that...
I think radio still hates them.
Probably, yeah. But I think that's, I think you could say that. I mean, I think, that when, if you're talking about FM starting in 68... Led Zeppelin, they went out. The reason they became successful in America is because they toured, not because their stuff got played on the radio. They toured for a whole bloody year. They record 2 albums in a year. Talking about 2 albums in a year. Was it? I'm pretty sure it was that the Zombies. What's that? Their record company wanted 3 albums in a year.
Yeah.
Wow! But anyway, they released Led Zeppelin 1, then they recorded Led Zeppelin 2 in the same year, released it in the same year. But they toured to find their audience. They toured,
big time,
and they toured on the back of the fact that there's this new thing called rock. The alternative culture of rock is happening, and we're in the forefront of that, and we can go out and we can find a new youth audience to, rather than it being played on the radio.
Yeah, Robert Plant in his book talks about, that year. He said that year was the year that made him. He thought he was pretty good, Simon. He thought he was shit hot before he, and recording that
year
band.
of touring America. Yeah.
and then he realized when he came back after that, then he felt like he was a singer.
Yeah. Well, he can't have been. He was about 19 or so, wasn't he? Oh, no, 20.
Yeah.
So very young to be. And of course, if you're come from a working class background in the Black Country in near Birmingham, that America is a kind of is the land of unicorns. It's a complete. You fly there, age 19. His mind must have been blown by that experience. And then having to sing to completely different audience.
He puts a lot of credit to Jimmy Page. We can't underestimate Jimmy Page's role early on in that band. Very driven, made sure that the band were looked after. He was the what is it? The manager, the tour manager, Simon. He was
Peter Grant.
Yeah, but he was the tour.
Richard.
But Jimmy Page though was the tour manager.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
He was the guy that was making sure that they were looked after. That they were slapping them on the back. Making sure that we're going to do this well. Very driven, very focused. Again, I want to get back to this point that I've made to you many, many times. What is it about these English guys that are very determined, very focused? And Jimmy Page was a focused musician back in 1963, Simon.
Oh, he was. Can we just say good night to John Harding?
Good night, John.
Thanks very much for joining. Thanks for your contributions. John. It's really good to have you along. Yeah.
Jump in
on
next
and
time.
Hear some stories. Yeah. Well, especially if his mum was doing booking of Carl Perkins. That's something to hear about. Oh yeah. Take care of yourself, John. Stay safe and well.
Phenomenal, Simon. You're right. That touring for a year.
But they're all driven. I mean, Eric Clapton. Nobody more driven than Eric Clapton. Yep. Nobody more driven. Nobody more focused.
Yep.
I think possibly. I don't know about Jeff Beck. Maybe slightly less focused. I'm not sure. I don't know.
No. Watch his documentary. It's bizarre. He is. I can't work the guy out because he'd go home. He makes a point of it 3 or 4 times. Once again, I find myself on my mum's couch again, on my mum's settee.
Yeah.
And if he didn't, mate, he didn't give a shit. If he didn't like it, he wouldn't argue.
No, just
he
go.
Wouldn't say anything. He'd just go.
Just leave. But I think that. Interestingly,
what is it they're called? An Irish goodbye?
It's an Irish goodbye, yeah, but just leave, yeah. But the interesting part of that is that you would say that he is less successful than Clapton and Page because he doesn't quite have that drive. All the talent in the world.
Good point.
But
I would argue that.
Is that a fair argument with Jeff Beck?
I would argue that from what I know. He's not, mate. And you look at Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, very driven. Very,
yeah.
Paul McCartney, John Lennon, very driven.
Yeah, very driven. Yeah. Oh yeah, driven to be successful. Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? That whatever else, there, in a sense, you've got the whole new world opening up. The kind of this is the teenage, this is the youth culture kind of thing. But those guys would have been a success because they were driven, very driven. Jimmy Page, was playing music, all the time. Obviously, and I see it with other people. Practiced all the time. I mean, Hendrix, massively, instrumentally, massively driven.
Yeah.
To play kind of thing, and it's pork. We've got Pork Chop SRV in the hi Pork Chop SRV. Welcome from Houston, Texas. Yeah, home of the mighty ZZ Top. Yes, indeed.
Oh, g'day, Pork Chop. Sorry,
that's worth a lot. Yeah, welcome. Yeah.
We missed it. Well, actually, Simon just alerted me to you. G'day, Pork Chop. That's a cool name. Pork Chop in Texas.
Yeah.
We got Sonia here. Sonia's in the chat. She's from Texas too.
She's from Texas too. Yeah.
Great.
That's cool. Yeah. So, so it's nice. Yeah. So, so I think that drive, and you're right. They all had that drive, to succeed, and they did, and I think they had, a lot of help on the way, a lot of, but, for the Beatles to get through all the crap that they had to deal with, with Alan Klein and the breakup and all those things, and keep going, each of them, making music and stuff. It's, you've got to have some drive about you, haven't you? You've got to have something, that thing that we've talked about on here before, where, they'd all they'd go to a board meeting in the morning where they all had to sign, bankruptcy, but all, papers to split up the Beatles, and have terrible kind of business things. Then they go in the afternoon to the studio.
I did a show with Carl, and I mentioned to him that I just finished watching a documentary on Oasis, Blur, and and another band. Anyway, they were talking about these English pop bands from the mid 1990s.
Suede? Anyway, don't matter. Somebody else.
No.
Oasis. Yeah.
Pulp Fiction. Pulp.
Yeah, it could be Pulp. Yeah. Pulp.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the point that they made is the record company guys, because they were interviewing the record company guys, and they said one thing again, and it links back to just what you and I have just been saying. He said that Blur, not necessarily Blur, but certainly Oasis, realized very early on what music could do to get them out of their working class.
Yeah.
Again, very driven.
Yeah,
we get
absolutely.
The impression that Liam and Noel were lager louts, getting in trouble. They certainly took opportunities in the press to get a point across. But Simon, these guys, if you know anything about, they were rehearsing in they had a loft somewhere. These guys were rehearsing 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And
they were famous.
And that kind of, that kind of drive is in that kind of, sticking it out and just, keep doing it, it's 99% perspiration, 1%, inspiration, isn't it? That's 95%, but 5%. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? That you can be as brilliant can be, but if you don't have the drive to succeed, that really that supersedes, being super talented, Noel Gallagher is not the world's greatest guitar player, but, in that context of that band, man, was he successful, Okay. Well done.
Well, that's why I'm not famous, because I'm a pretty good guitar player, but I just didn't have the drive.
Man. Yes. Yeah. Happy to sit out at the club for a few numbers. Yeah. Well, yeah, completely. And all those people, who wanted, Bob Dylan and all of that.
Simon, certainly not a great guitarist, but a bloody great songwriter. Those Oasis songs, that second album, definitely bloody hell. Champagne Supernova. Don't look back.
What's the story? More in Glory. Absolutely, maybe it's the first one.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, maybe the first one. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the first two, amazing. Amazing
great
kind of
songs
and amazing records, amazing everything. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
But
and the interesting thing about all of those people is, I think, is, what drives them, what drove Eric Clapton to be, to be like that. What do you think is he quite OCD?
Oh, I don't know.
He doesn't seem like it to me, but
that's my short argument, because I always ask you guys, what is it about these skinny English guys?
I've never seen Clapton's fridge from the 70s with all the beer bottles lined up with all the labels pointing out. I may have missed it, but it is, it is. No, it's really interesting that yes, Kubrick Lover. He's talking about Oasis, the Gallagher brothers. It's that kind of drive and that kind of, to succeed and stuff, and to realise. Although, as we said, that do you think that you might know this. Do you think that in 65, 66, that Clapton saw himself still playing blues at 75, whatever he is? Has
Yes,
anybody ever asked him that? He did
yes,
see himself as a
yes.
career musician. Well
Yeah,
done.
I'm going to say from the biographies that I've read and bits and pieces that I've
Yeah,
put
yeah.
together, that when he was recording the Beano album
Yep.
and he was entrenched upstairs listening to John Mayall's record collection, if you had asked him then what he was
Hmm.
going to do for the rest of his life, he would tell you that this is what I'm doing.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. 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 That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the same is true of someone like Jimmy Page and stuff like that.
I'm not an expert on Jimmy Page, so I can't
No,
offer
I'm
an
not.
opinion, Simon.
No, it's not. But yeah, my guess is that, and I think that thing that wonderful thing about somebody was it. Somebody asked Ringo whether he saw himself doing this in a year's time. He went, "No. If I get a couple of hairdressing shops out of it, I'll be happy." You know,
Yeah.
it's like, well, but that speaks to somebody who doesn't think it's going to last the next 10 minutes, and so that'll be good. Whereas, I think by the time you get into 67, 68, people start going, hang on a minute, maybe we can make a bit more of a career out of it.
Well,
We
Simon,
can
this
go.
this
I
morning
said,
I watched Hard Day's Night again, and I was just reading a little bit about it.
yeah.
So just
Oh,
you already know
just gonna
this, and
throw.
guys in the chat probably already know this too. But again, I just have to highlight this. They had to quickly get that film out because they were scared that the Beatles weren't going to be popular when they released the film.
After my Wi-Fi. There we are. I've come
Um,
back. There we are.
okay.
And we're back.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just saying about Hard Day's Night. They were concerned about getting that film out quick enough because they were concerned, Simon, that the Beatles were going to be old hat.
Yeah. Absolutely. Somebody might have forgotten about you in 20 minutes. Yeah. Completely. Yes. And finding that. Kubrick, love you. You're in for a treat. Hard Day's Night's a wonderful film.
Oh, I can't wait for you to tell Simon and I what you think of it.
Yeah.
You can't watch it once and give us an opinion. You got to watch it a couple of times because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's an amazing portrait of that. Yeah, that sort of early Beatles pop star life, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at your yawn as alerting me that we've been on 2 hours, so we should.
It's only 9 a.m. for me. I don't know what's the matter with you, Willie. I haven't had a hot drink for the last 20 minutes. Gasping.
Oh look, man, I've really enjoyed tonight's show. It's you've given me some food for thought, some connections there. I look forward to more and more of these linkages with that album and that movement, because obviously we've not exhausted, and we're just doing our part, and everyone else here in the chat contributing to the history of rock and roll.
The oral history of rock and roll. Yes. Yeah. No, it was good. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, really interesting. Getting back to our roots a bit instead of So yeah, are we gonna have the Great Vanzini on? Let me know. Let me know.
Yes.
I'm not going anywhere apparently.
Yeah, nor am I. But the Great Vanzini is going to jump on, guys, and he's going to finish having a bit of a chat with us, show us some guitars, and talk. About the jazz fusion scene in America.
Hear about that. Yeah. And yes, So, I mean, in the sorry, I'm just going to say something now. In the UK, we talk about sort of different, but jazz in the UK, there was a whole kind of, as part of the punk thing, the late 70s, the early 80s, but there was an equivalent kind of thing in jazz, British jazz as well, UK jazz. There were a whole load of people who came like. I don't know if these names won't mean anybody, but Courtney Pine and Andy Shepherd and
Courtney Pine's outstanding.
Yeah, but he came, he was in that new kind of revolution late 70s, early 80s.
Yes, I
Yeah.
remember.
See, so
Yes.
you know, the sort of. I'm not saying it's jazz punk, but you know, it's
But we
you
had a
know,
guy too here in New Zealand, Nathan Hines, who was a clarinet player who went over to the UK and jammed with those guys too. Yeah. Now,
so
oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
so you know, so he started in the. He's a bit younger than me. He's 64. So you know, so we're talking about the mid 80s, I guess. You know, he's 20, but you know, 86 was his debut album. So you know that. Yeah, so that you know, even the jazz world changed and was changing through that period as well. You know,
I
and
wonder if
doing a
the great Manzini was a
great Virginia,
Mahavishnu orchestra fan too, being a guitar player. Bet he
Courtney
was.
Pine is a great sax player. Great
Yeah.
Vanzini, worth checking out.
Oh,
Andy Shepherd is another really good sax. I wouldn't really sax
yeah.
players, but was a really good sax. He's from Courtney Pine's not, but not from Bristol, but Andy Shepherd is. But yeah. You know, start. Yes, but it's interesting that you know they went and did that stuff.
Cool.
Shepherd, you know, yeah.
I look
Sorry,
forward
yeah.
to some. You're telling us the jazz fusion, how you went from rock and roll to jazz fusion. I'm interested. It'll be
So
cool.
Andy Shepherd is a year older than me. So yeah. So he started in 1978. Now I see. So he started in 1978 and kind of in the punk era, but doing jazz stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
awesome.
I'll just do another 20 minutes on British jazz. And something. Okay, we'll be done.
No, we're off. We'll talk about.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Yes, awesome. We should say thanks to Arvin. Thanks to Kubrick Lover, Great Vanzini, and Sonia. Thanks, Sonia. Hopefully, we can get you on as well at some point. That'd be good. And Pork Chop SRV. Thanks for joining, Pork Chop. That's been really good.
That's cool.
For you to jump in and John as well. John Hardin. Thanks, John, for joining. That's really good. And Guitar Hack. Check out Guitar Hack. He does smoking with the hack in his smoking shack most days.
Quentin James.
Quentin, the mighty Quentin James. Yes. Quentin effing James. So that's really cool. And Emmett, of course. Don't forget Emmett. So
be safe, everybody.
Be Todd safe. Flowers as well. Todd, I'm forgetting you, Todd. No, shout out, thanks, Todd, for joining. And that's really cool.
Keep your spirits up because these are going to be difficult times. I don't want to get too doom.
Sean Zimmerman.
Like that, but they're saying that we could be down for another 3 weeks on top of the 4 weeks that they announced.
Dave as well. Yeah, and Dave as well. Dave, Wednesday store. He's been in as well.
Sean, were you looking, Sean?
Was I what? Yes. Was he lucky? Yes, I don't know. It's yes, but he just said I'm sure he hasn't made a comment before. Sean, if you made a comment and I missed it, I apologise.
No, I didn't. It's his first comment.
But yeah, so be safe, everyone, and make sure you look after yourselves because, as Andrew says, this is going to be a long haul. It's not going to be we're all out in 2 weeks sort of thing. It's going to be at least a couple of months. I think of us being chained to our houses and stuff very strongly.
Well, I've just watched some news segments earlier today about what's happening in North America and in America, and it's just
taking off.
Yeah,
frightening. Yeah. Oh, I think it's frightening anyway. Just Dave Wednesday store said it earlier, but apparently Marianne Faithfull's got coronavirus.
Oh,
so thoughts out to Marianne Faithfull.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Well, have a good week, and we'll see you in the week. Yeah. We'll be
no. Shit, no. A couple of days.
Yeah, that's what I mean. In the week? Well, we can start the week like tomorrow or Tuesday or
in a week. Sorry, in a week.
Tomorrow and Tuesday.
In the week. In the week. Not in a week. In the week.
Sorry. Yes. The key word in that, the 3-letter word was the in the week, like tomorrow, day after tomorrow. Yes, that'll do.
All right.
Take care, all. Take care. Cheers.